as you all know, enterprises play a key role in creating employment. So supporting the creation of sustainable enterprises and increasing their productivity is key for them to create decent work. So what is the situation of enterprises in the BRICS and what can be done to improve it? Let's look at that. You see on this slide that micro, small and medium enterprises, so enterprises of less than 50 workers, play an important role as the employment backbones in most economies. In the BRICS, 7 out of 10 workers are employed in small economic units. So as you see on the slide, they are either self-employed or employed in micro and small enterprises. And you can also see on the graph that the self-employed, or it says own account workers on the graph, the blue bar, account for 30% of total employment in the BRICS, compared to 39% in middle-income countries and 10.4% in high-income countries. So a big employment role. But micro and small enterprises are falling behind larger enterprises in terms of productivity and working conditions. Why is this so? There are several causes. There are internal reasons, external reasons. Internally, we have listed here a few. We notice that small economic units have below average management capacity. They have limited access to resources, to skills, and to markets. And they also have lower economies of scale. In terms of external reasons, these encompass difficulties in accessing finance, credit, and markets, and the complexity of navigating regulatory frameworks, which is also something our employer representative this morning mentioned. In addition to these reasons, weak social dialogue and collective bargaining can also impede job quality gains in micro and small enterprises. Looking now at the broader macroeconomic picture, we can see on this slide that labor productivity is increasing in the BRICS, but it increased at a slower pace in the last decade than previously, especially in Brazil and South Africa, and over the past 4 years in India. So you can see a flattening of the curves since 2012, more or less. Or, I mean, it can also go back to 2018, 2008, the crisis, but even more so after 2012. And this flattening is true whether we look at output per hour worked or output per worker. Several factors explain this, among which the growing divergence between low and high productivity sectors and between frontier enterprises that exhibit high productivity and wages and other enterprises. So let me now turn to the drivers of productivity growth. At the macroeconomic level, laws and regulations, robust labor market institutions, and the existence of employment policy frameworks that prioritize productivity growth are important. And so is the existence of social dialogue on working conditions, for example, on minimum wages, and a fair sharing of the benefits of economic growth. In some countries, the transfer of labor and capital from low value-added activities, mostly in traditional agriculture, into higher value-added manufacturing and services has the potential to generate productivity gains to make progress towards higher per capita incomes and decent work for all, if the right regulatory, institutional, and policy framework is in place. Similarly, innovation capacity and entrepreneurship are important contributors to productivity and growth. At the enterprise level, productivity and decent work are connected as well. For workers, increased productivity can lead to improved working conditions, including higher wages, reduced work hours, better safety and health at work. And vice versa, improved working conditions, such as reduced work hours and higher pay, contribute to productivity growth. But these linkages are not automatic. Firm-level social dialogue is key in translating productivity gains into improved working conditions. And good management practices and processes are needed to translate improved working conditions into productivity gains. For enterprises, those that offer better than average jobs and that invest in the skills and the long-term retention and welfare of their workers also achieve higher than average productivity and therefore have more potential for growth. Productivity gains can lead to lower unit costs of production, and when reduced costs are reflected in lower pricing, this benefits consumers and can strengthen enterprises' market position. Increased profits can be reinvested in the firm, either in capital or in the workers' conditions. Now, a common feature of the BRICS countries is a large size of the informal economy. The informal economy remains an important source of employment in most BRICS countries. And as you see on this slide, it ranges from 21% in Russia to almost 87% in India of total employment. We know that productivity gains are linked to improved working conditions and the transition to formality, so improved working conditions in the informal economy. The COVID-19 pandemic has pushed many workers and enterprises into informality and exposed the associated risks for workers. And the majority of enterprises in the informal economy are small economic units with lower aggregate productivity than enterprises in the formal economy. But productivity growth for these firms can facilitate their transitions to formality. In a global review that was done of policy evidence, we found that targeted policy interventions to promote productivity in informal economic units were found to have positive effects on formalization among enterprises already operating at a sufficient production scale and interacting with formal market activities. Also, our latest global wage report looked at this evidence and concluded that low productivity is one of the drivers of informality, and so vice versa, of course. In addition, gender dynamics and environmental sustainability are important concerns for sustainable enterprises and inclusive productivity growth. On gender, productivity differences exist between women and men-led enterprises and between women and men workers. Women-led enterprises encounter greater barriers in embracing technology, accessing foreign investment, and protecting themselves against adverse business environments in comparison with men-led enterprises. This has a negative impact on the productivity of women-led enterprises. Furthermore, women workers are dominant in low value-added sectors such as hospitality and retail, which have been hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, making women more vulnerable to job and income losses. And finally, 3/4 of unpaid care work is done by women, which is not captured in productive measurements, despite the fact that productivity is indirectly subsidized by unpaid work. On environmental sustainability, greener production processes could boost enterprise productivity in the medium to long term, and this transition requires access to substantial capital, clean technologies, affordable renewable energies, know-how, and adequate skills in the short term. Certain environmental practices may boost productivity, but do not automatically generate decent work. For example, millions of people work in the circular economy and waste management industry in the developing world under informal and poor working conditions. It is therefore important to address the triple nexus of environmental, economic, and social drivers of productivity through a just transition in which enterprises and their workers are adequately supported and opportunities for the creation of decent green jobs and enterprises are fully considered. In that respect, at the enterprise level, the adoption of green business practices is of the utmost importance, particularly among micro and small enterprises. So to sum up, although each BRICS economy has distinctive features, some commonalities can be observed. All have a very large share of employment in micro and small enterprises with lower than average productivity level. All grapple with declining returns from structural transformation, disparity between productivity and wage growth, as well as challenges regarding informality, gender equality, and environmental sustainability. The following policy considerations are therefore relevant to all BRICS countries. The first one is that a strong and mutually reinforcing link between productivity growth and decent work must be established to achieve inclusive and sustainable growth. The second is that productivity and decent work dynamics interface across macroeconomic, sectoral, and enterprise levels. And the third is that the barriers that impede productivity growth and decent work in the BRICS span economic, social, environmental, and political domains. Private, public, and civil society actors, therefore, all have a role to play in overcoming these barriers. So to boost the decent work potential of SMEs through increased productivity, a systemic approach to tackling productivity and decent work deficits and their root causes is needed. Enterprises, workers, and their environments are deeply interlinked, and the drivers of productivity growth and decent work interact at the national, sectoral, and enterprise levels. And this is what is depicted on the chart in the slide. It's a bit small, so hopefully I can take you through it. At the macro level, so this is the blue outer circle, the legal, regulatory, institutional, and policy environment can result in structural barriers to sustainable enterprise development, productivity growth, and decent work. So, as you might be able to see, I'm not sure, in the dark blue circle, to enhance entrepreneurship, innovation, and productivity, policymakers can act on a range of levers, from national development plans, employment policies, laws and regulations, labor market institutions, and social dialogue. Let's take employment and social protection policies, for example. If they are targeted at productivity enhancement, they can be very effective. Studies have shown their positive effects. For example, unemployment insurance increases labor productivity by encouraging workers to look for more productive jobs. Pension benefits as incentives in employment contracts have facilitated the introduction of productivity-enhancing solutions at the firm level. Social protection programs encouraging individual, household, and communities to create and protect assets and to use their resources more effectively also contribute greatly to this. Efficient tax regulation and business registration procedures are key to supporting the micro and small enterprises that tend to lack specialized staff and resources to navigate complex regulations. And finally, also at that macro level, social dialogue can support productivity-enhancing policies by ensuring policy coherence and strengthening the relationship between productivity and working conditions by ensuring that the gains are shared fairly. At the meso level, so that's the white circle in the middle, skills, finance, technology, infrastructure, research and development influence the business environment for the creation and support of sustainable micro and small enterprises. Access to finance and credit conditions favorable to MSEs are essential to help them cope with shocks such as the COVID-19 pandemic, invest in their business, and enhance productivity. Sector-specific interventions can be put in place to address challenges relating to productivity and working conditions by improving the functioning of value chains, rules and support functions in target sectors, and by strengthening meaningful social dialogue and collective bargaining at sector level. This can help policymakers place micro and small enterprises' productivity interventions within wider relevant policy strategies, particularly in areas related to skills, technology transfer, digitalization, and enterprise formalization. And at the micro level, so that is the inner circle, the light blue circle, interventions to upgrade management practices, strengthen meaningful social dialogue and collective bargaining, increase resource efficiency, accelerate the transition to sustainable production, enhance business resilience and continuity, and maintain a minimum efficient scale and economic viability are key policy interventions. Within the context of collective bargaining, social dialogue can facilitate the discussion and negotiation of issues such as the adoption of high-performance workplace practices or the prevention and resolution of labor disputes. This integrated approach with the 3 levels is what we call the productivity ecosystems for decent work approach. It is demand-driven, context-sensitive, and rooted in social dialogue. It focuses on promoting the role of government and the social partners as agents of change for productivity and decent work improvements. Activities associated with the approach need to be aligned with policy and sectoral priorities of government and build on existing policy frameworks and social dialogue infrastructures. So, in conclusions, 5 main takeaways from this presentation. First, a positive, mutually reinforcing link between productivity and decent work is an important determinant of inclusive growth. Such a link exists when the productivity gains are fairly shared between enterprises and workers, and when decent work improvements contribute to productivity growth. Second, all BRICS countries have made significant strides regarding productivity growth and decent work. Over the past decade, progress has slowed and productivity growth has decelerated, with implications for productive employment creation that is now lagging behind. Third, although each BRICS country faces distinctive dynamics, all are characterized by a complex constellation of productivity and decent work challenges that interface across the macro, sectoral, and micro levels. Fourth, promoting productivity growth in micro and small enterprises requires an integrated approach where productivity and decent work constraints are addressed across all 3 levels. Fifth, and finally, the productivity ecosystem approach offers an action-oriented approach to tackling productivity and decent work deficits. It emphasizes the importance of collaboration within and across government, social partners, the private sector, and civil society. The approach is being implemented in South Africa, and my colleagues will tell you more about it later. Thank you for your attention.